It's something that you don't want to find out later on down the road that probably could have been avoided, right? Because that's how it always works. It could have been avoided if I had just done this 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. I hear that kind of stuff all the time. So why not bring some awareness today? Just know that, there's a ton of things that are out there that could be affecting your testosterone, affecting your health overall, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be super expensive to make all of these changes. I think there's a little more work involved, right? To be fair, maybe it's not as convenient, but once you get into that routine, it's going to be like second nature. 4 out of 10 men under the age of 40 are below where they need to be in their testosterone levels. We talked about this last week. This is a follow-up to that episode. We talked about just the food and some of the other aspects that's contributing to this. But today I want to talk about the environmental stuff that we really don't have a whole ton of control over. So how do we combat that? So let me just give you an example. This water bottle here, right? The plastic, right? No good. No good for testosterone. There's a lot of studies that are coming out. You got the whole microplastics. You've got the BPA, right? And not to mention, have you ever drank one of these when you weren't really supposed to because you left it in your car and it's like 100 degrees outside or it's super hot in your car and you're just drinking the water and it tastes funny? Yeah, that's not good. Not supposed to be doing that. But what's crazy about it is that one of the things that kind of gets my mind going down this rabbit hole is, how is this transported, right? Just because you pick it up at the grocery store and everything's all copacetic on temperature doesn't mean it wasn't sitting in the back of a hot truck, getting transported across the U.S. or whatever the manufacturing place was, from point A to point B. And was it sitting on a loading dock? How do we know that, this particular bottle of water was all temperature controlled, from point A to point B when you bought it and then when you took it home? And if any of you has an emergency case of this, like I do, because I've had it before, and have ever tasted water that you had over a period of time, like a couple of years, and you've tasted it, it tastes funny. So to say that, whatever's in here or what they make this with doesn't get into your water and you're consuming is absolutely crazy to think that everything is just perfectly okay. So these are the things that are really kind of on my mind when I talk about this subject, because testosterone, like I said last week, is so essential to, so many things, right? Building muscle, blood regulation, fat. It plays such an integral role. And, we don't have to go down, each particular item that it helps with in your overall health. But let's just put it this way. If you have high testosterone, it's a really good thing. But we're just trying to get back to normal, right? Again, 4 out of 10, right, men under the age of 40 have lower levels of testosterone than optimal. And if you get to your 40s, like me, and you continue on that process, right, it naturally is declining as you continue to get older. So if you're starting below par and getting to that point where you're already going to start losing testosterone, it's really not a good thing, right? You don't want to be digging yourself out of a hole. So, the other thing too, that's come out, heavy metals, you've probably seen it all over social and just, all these studies that are coming out of all these metals that are in the water and the air, right? And rightfully so, it also impedes, believe it or not, right, your testosterone. So if your body is being impeded to produce more testosterone, right, that's not going to be a good thing. So a lot of things, again, we can talk about the health concerns, but yeah, it affects fertility. It affects your mood. It affects so many different aspects of not only your physical, but your mental health, right? So these are toxins that we're dealing with every day. So what am I saying here? Have you ever seen that meme about Bubble Boy, right? You're walking around and you got a bubble and you're just, he's walking all over the place and he's not getting exposed to anything. Well, you and I both know that's not realistic. It's funny, but I think you have to have a mindset of how am I going to protect myself, right, from these extenuating factors, that are in the environment. So on a day-to-day basis, right, we always talk about small wins, right? We're not talking about trying to do things to an extreme because, we've found, as I've said in these previous episodes, that that's not really realistic, right? Because there's no way to be able to just take all of this on and 100% just eradicate all this stuff. So let me give you an example. So one of the things that I do is I went and bought copper water bottles. I found them on Amazon, and I was pretty doggone proud of myself because I was like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna get filtered water and I'm gonna pour it in here, and this is what I'm gonna drink out of. And this is the way that I'm gonna combat from drinking these because this was convenient. It was convenient for me because you go to Costco, you buy 40 of these, and it's like, I don't know, man, it's like $5, $6, super cheap. If I'm trying to drink a gallon of water, every single day, right? All I have to do is drink what? Right. So every two of these is 32 ounces. So if I drink 8 of these a day, it's really simple. I don't have to measure out my water consumption. It equals a gallon. So it's super easy. But man, I was drinking this stuff all day long. And I thought, man, I'm not going back and saying there's a direct correlation of, potentially having lower than normal testosterone levels when you're drinking these. But the studies are coming out and they're saying that, what they make this with is a potential problem. So back to the whole copper like water bottle, and they're stainless steel. But the funny thing is as I'm looking at this, I'm going, man, the filtration system that I'm using is actually in a plastic pitcher, right? And whatever I'm screwing the top on with of this copper water bottle is also made of plastic. And I'm like, how do I get away from this? And it's crazy to think about because you can find plastic in almost anything, right? So same with, the metals and, all these toxins in the air and so on and so forth. So the idea of trying to be 100% diligent in just eradicating this stuff, right? And not coming in contact with it, probably not really realistic. But what I'm saying is you can do a little bit each day, right? Change your habits each day, right? Step by step. If you're getting stainless steel, water bottles to drink out of, you're being more aware, right? That, hey, maybe I shouldn't have plastic food containers. Maybe I should use glass, right? Maybe I need to really think about like, what my food is in. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's budget friendly that you can store your food in. But I mean, that's a big thing. Like think about like just food that's in plastic trays that you're heating up, right? Like when you go to the grocery store, you need a quick meal, whether they're quote unquote healthy or not. I mean, I'll leave that up to you to decide, but you're heating this up at a high rate of heat, right? With radiation in the microwave, and you can't not think that some of this stuff is coming off of the plastic into the food, and then it's covered with a film of plastic and so on and so forth. But if you're really just thinking about this from a standpoint of, man, this could be affecting my testosterone, and this could be one of the contributing factors. I'm not saying it's the contributing factor. I'm just saying it could be one, then it's probably really smart to do something about it. And that's why I'm bringing attention to this. It's probably really smart to do something about it. Even if you can take small steps towards that and not going to be 100%, knowing that you got to be okay with that, right? But what can you do in your day-to-day consumption or your day-to-day exposure that might help reduce, this exposure to toxins? So the other thing that I didn't even really think about, but as I was doing research into this is, man, soap and deodorant and, shoot, man, toothpaste. I mean, whatever. If you put gel in your hair, obviously I don't put gel in my hair, right? I used to, but I don't have to do that anymore. But like even my shampoo, or maybe you guys use conditioner, it's like, what is like this all being made with? We all gravitate, like for me, I mean, as a guy, I'm sitting here going, man, what's the least expensive that smells good, right? What's the least expensive that smells good? But, somebody used to always say sometimes cheap is expensive, right? So if it's causing you, issues and harms, isn't it worth maybe investing a little bit more money, right? Even if it's like $1 more. I mean, I'm not saying it is, but if it is, would it be a better choice to go after something, that is more natural and, do your own research on the brands that, produce products, right, that are going to be free of these toxins that are causing, a reduction in testosterone. And I bet if you do enough research, you're going to find that, it's probably not really good for your health in other aspects too. But I'll leave that up to you. But we're talking about testosterone. This is the thing that, I want to really kind of drive home is that it's not just the consumables, right? It's also the stuff that you put on your body, right? What you come in contact with. We said air, right? Air. It's like, oh my gosh, like give me a break. So how do I deal with that? Like, no, I'm not saying that, again, you got to be that bubble boy, beam where you're walking around completely shielded. I'm just saying that, maybe it's a good idea to get an air purifier. So when you're at home, maybe you invest a little bit of money and you're cleaning the air to make sure that there's not all these particles that are floating around that have potential toxins that are affecting that as well. So that's another thing that you may want to consider. And yeah, they're a pain in the butt, and you have to do your research because I'm sure there's a ton of air purifiers that are super cheap out there. And I'm not saying that go for the most expensive one, because that's not necessarily going to get you the best, but you just really have to pay attention to your reviews and so on and so forth. So think about like food, right? We talked about food consumption, making sure you're not eating processed food. I mean, that's important. If you can do organic, that's great. Filtered water, right? That's great. But how about like if you don't have like a huge like air cleaner, right? Like, purifier, what about getting some indoor plants? I mean, what a concept, right? Something that's not really hard to take care of, right? But just having that in your house, because that's actually a natural filtration system, the air that's inside of your house or apartment or wherever you live. But the other thing too, I was kind of thinking about was, so I'm kind of into this whole like sweat and sauna, and I know it like has all sorts of health benefits. And as I was kind of diving into this, topic, they're saying, man, this is a really good thing to kind of cleanse out your body, right? So sweat, is a natural way to kind of make you cool, cool you off temperature wise. But think about this: if you're just expelling all of these toxins, I mean, that's going to be super helpful as well. So yes, I'm not saying go out there and, buy a sauna. I'm not even saying you can go out there and join some kind of a spa or some place that has these. I mean, we have them here in town, and, it's like all medical grade, and you sit for about 45 minutes, you sweat and you feel great. But the point is that you're like sweating out all these toxins. So if you don't have something like that, I mean, they've got these blankets, these sauna blankets. We have one of those at home, but my favorite is a sweatsuit. They're pretty affordable. I mean, they don't look the best. They're not super stylish. Some of them are, but you could wear that sweatsuit, and basically go and walk and exercise. And if it's moderately warm outside, you're going to build out a sweat. And yeah, when you take it off, it's going to be nasty. But, that's another way where you don't necessarily have to spend a ton of money, like investing in your own sauna or paying some kind of a monthly bill to be able to access one, or even spend the money for a sauna blanket, and you can, buy a sweatsuit or something that's going to make you sweat, that's going to have that effect on you to be able to kind of cleanse those things out. So let's just kind of tie this all back together, right? So last week we talked about, the food, the alcohol, right? And, all of those aspects, right? And what that does to your testosterone. And this week we're talking about this environmental factor, right? So, plastics, the way that you consume things. Remember, we're talking about this for guys that like are in their 20s, right? They're already showing that 4 out of 10 are below par, below average, right? So how do you address this without having to go crazy and change a bunch of things? Because to try to get to 100% is unrealistic. If somebody gets there, I'd love to hear a comment if you guys have found like the hack to be able to like, get rid of all of this stuff that we're exposed to. But I'm just saying that, you take little steps, right? The stainless steel water bottle, I like the copper ones. I mean, they kind of look cool, right? The containers, paying attention to what you're, bathing in, and, soaps and shampoos and so on and so forth, plants or air purifiers. But the idea is that, I think what I really want to drive home is that I think it's important for you to pay attention. And that's something that, I mean, I'm holding myself accountable to, because it's really easy in the name of convenience and easiness to maybe do things that are not necessarily good for our health. And it's something that you don't want to find out later on down the road that probably could have been avoided, right? Because that's how it always works. It could have been avoided if I had just done this 10 years ago or 5 years ago or 20 years ago. I hear that kind of stuff all the time. So why not bring some awareness today? Just know that, there's a ton of things that are out there that could be affecting your testosterone, affecting your health overall, and that it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be super expensive to make all of these changes. I think there's a little more work involved, right? To be fair, maybe it's not as convenient, but once you get into that routine, it's going to be like second nature. So I would love to hear some commentary on this, right? I mean, either way, whether you buy what I'm telling you right now, whether you have some pushback, I'd love to start a conversation with you. So please leave a comment. We're trying to grow the channel, so Love to hear what you think. Please rate the show. If you know someone who would be interested in hearing more about this, share the episode. And you can find us on YouTube at Hey Charles Biz, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify at Hey Charles 77 on Instagram and TikTok, and Charles Ernst on LinkedIn. See you next time.